Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Building a Deeper Practice with LimaCharlie SecOps Cloud Platform. My name is Christopher Luft, and I'm excited to be hosting this session with you today. Before we dive in, I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their busy schedule to join us. We have a really compelling story to share with you about how Thomas Murray transformed their digital forensics and incident response capabilities using our platform. For those that might be new to LimaCharlie, we're the company behind the SecOps Cloud Platform. Think of it as AWS, but specifically designed for security operations. We built our platform API first, on demand, and pay per use, with the one core mission to give security teams and service providers the flexibility and control they need to build scalable, automated security operations without vendor lock-in or tool sprawl. Now, if you're a security consultant, MSSP, or part of an internal security team, you probably know the challenges we're going to be discussing today all too well. Traditional security tools often force you into rigid workflows. They don't integrate well with each other. And when you're trying to serve clients with diverse needs, this one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. That's exactly the challenge our guests face today before discovering LimaCharlie. And I'm thrilled to introduce Guillermo Roman, Senior DeFer Analyst at Thomas Murray. Do you want to maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Thomas Murray?
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. So my name is Guillermo. I'm based in Spain. I've been in Thomas Murray for the last about couple of years, and I have about, I think at this point, about 8 years experience on the FIR and specifically on incident response. We respond to threats pretty much every day, mainly ransomware, PCs, of the catalog of kind of attacks or compromises that you can find on a company. So I will be doing a very quick introduction about who we are and what we do in Thomas Murray. So Thomas Murray, a couple of years ago, we created this new department for consultancy or cybersecurity. We have several arms, as you would say. We have an incident response team, part of which I am. We have people doing pen testing, red teaming, GTI kind of stuff, and we try to centralize everything within cyber threat intelligence. We have dedicated people trying to pursue, find out new tendencies, and try to integrate that into all of our different workflows. So we have a full service offering. I'm going to be pretty fast about this. So first of all, we can respond to unexpected events, preserving reputation, value of the corporations. So our clients trust us to get into the environments, monitor that, and very quickly respond to any incident that they might be unfortunately involved with. That's the main part I'm going to be showing about today. With this demo, proving how we leverage LimaCharlie and another series of systems in order to make this response very fast and very effective in time, and which actually lets our clients save up in budget, basically, and also makes the response super quick, as you will be able to see. Then we can improve your security standpoint and understand your risk profile based on real world factors. We will work with you, do tabletop exercises, maybe analyze your incident response plans and make you, try and make you better on handling your risk. Then we can also work with you securing and defending against known and unknown threats. Again, I'll get back to that threat intel we have in the middle. That we try to integrate in all of our services, and then finally quantify, try to plan continuous improvement in your future, make a plan with you and let you improve, maybe reach compliance, using our knowledge of real world events. Again, I always get back to that front into side. Apart from our consultancy kind of branches, we have open security, which is an exposure, a surface exposure platform, attack surface exposure platform that we also use in order to track and monitor your external surface and try to improve how outsiders, potential hackers might analyze and try to look at your company from the outside. So again, I'm going to do a very, very quick introduction on what we are going to be doing today. If that's all right, Christopher, or do you prefer to go through some questions before?
Maybe let's go through the questions and then you can do the
Okay.
demo. Just to help set the stage a little bit, right?
Okay, that's completely right.
Awesome. So I guess maybe to start, do you want to paint us a picture of what Defer looked like before you were using LimaCharlie?
Yes.
Like what? Yeah.
Of course. So something I've saw a lot of the in the industry before. If you do not take a step back and to look at your processes and see what can be improved, what kind of parts of your day-to-day work can be improved, can be made faster, can be automated, you will effectively be too slow to respond. Because if we have a threat, a live threat in an environment that we have to respond right now, we kind of wait for you to, or for me to get into the platform, search for that endpoint, kind of try to list, I don't know, manually list processes, manually list or search for specific files in the system, manually try and, well, in general, try to locate and isolate the whatever threat there is. You need to take a step back and try to think about where you can improve, what you can automate, and that's where things continue within LimaCharlie, such as, well, we'll be using those today, such as detection and response tools, which are how we automate the detection and response of actions. That means if a certain event appears in the platform, let's say there's a match for one specific hash of malware, we detect a new sensor reporting to the platform, that kind of stuff. We can take immediate and automatic action on those events and perform actions of those. We will also be using outputs, which is a way LimaCharlie is able to interact with outside systems. I will be using those today in order to communicate those kind of events to an external system, an automation system. In our case, that's going to be what is called an automation or an exam. I'll give the names of more alternatives, but that's pretty much a kind of workflow kind of background automation system. And then, the API, obviously, which I gotta say, LimaCharlie has a really, really nice and nicely documented API that we use pretty much every day, and that's vital to our processes. Because if I want to do sort of an analysis that has several steps, or an investigation that I want to give very quick orders, very quick queries, and get information real fast, and present that information to the wider team, I need an API that works, and I need an API that I easily know how to use, and we will also be leveraging that today.
So would you say this process of automating your workflows was easy? Was the integration a simple process?
It was. It actually was, and that was mainly thanks to the good documentation on LimaCharlie's API. You'll be surprised how many services out there that are not quite as optimal, and that even if we can use more complex systems, let's say that in a kind of sort of math way, we can use that, but that will make effectively the process a bit more of a pain. But if you have a very simple, straightforward API that we can use, that will make the development of those automations much, much smoother.
So when you started looking for the kind of tools that you were going to use to set up your Defer operations at Thomas Murray, what were the alternatives? What were the non-negotiables? What did Thomas Murray absolutely need in a Defer platform?
So what we really needed, again, was that easy-to-use API that we could leverage very fast. We also needed a system that allows us to very quickly respond to threats. That's where the DNR rules from LimaCharlie, the outputs come into place. We need a fairly simple way to implement those. That's a very, very subtle kind of requirement, because many platforms will allow you to do, let's call it similar things, but it's a little bit more difficult or convoluted to do. It's really straightforward in LimaCharlie, and that's why I really like to use that, and I'm really thankful that it's really that straightforward, because where an automation could take days or weeks to do in LimaCharlie, that can go down to hours. So that has a huge impact in our day-to-day kind of development work and also the FIR work.
Did cost play a role in your evaluation criteria?
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, being realistic, cost will always be a strong card on the table, but we think that the LimaCharlie model really matches what we need, which is being able to enroll clients very fast and given a very precise budget about what it's going to be costing from the EDR or LimaCharlie's kind of side of things. So that is very predictable, and that's something we take very seriously, and that's something we appreciate a lot from the platform.
Do you remember how you found LimaCharlie and maybe what your first impressions were?
So I found out from the rest of my beliefs when we were first kind of building the first processes in the practice, and it was quite surprising to me how straightforward it is, and I mean straightforward in a good way, because that doesn't mean it doesn't support a lot of things, because it does support a lot of things. It does support quite a ridiculously big kind of systems, legacy systems, server systems, and M365, SMTP kind of systems, a lot of mobile kind of systems, and we can gather all of those into the same platform, get a timeline for all of those in the same place, and that was really cool to me. Besides that, what I found was this real easy to use the API, and from my day-to-day work, that involves a lot of development for those automations that really appreciate.
So what was it that convinced you that it wasn't just like a vendor making big promises, which, is pretty consistent in this industry?
Well, it's what really convinced me is that it is possible to just get a trial directly from the platform with free 2 sensors, and you can do whatever you want with that. So it doesn't matter if somebody promises or over promises, because from the very beginning I was able to test everything I could with the platform, use the API, leverage the DNR rules, the outputs, everything. So I didn't have to believe anything before buying that, because I had already built something, let's call it a prototype, very fast, that I knew could develop into the full integrations that we had today.
Awesome. Okay, I think I'll stop with the questions and let you get on with your demonstration then. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So coming back into the very quick presentation, let's go back to this one. So the title of the webinar today was From Detection to Action, how we transform the incident response with effectively how we leverage LimaCharlie. So first of all, I want to give a quick outline of what we are going to be showing today. I'm not going to be showing how to fully set up this because that's slightly off the topic today. But just to give you an understanding on what's going on behind these scenes. So we have a central server for automations, which in our case is N810. You can also use any alternative that you might have at your disposal. We like N810. You can use Microsoft Flow. You can use IFTTT. You can use Zapier. Anything that you like, or anything that can just take all of this from the outside, take webhooks and take action on external system, that will be all right. Or even just if you're feeling very brave, you can just send up your Python scripts. So just to make this available from the outside, because this will be accessed from LimaCharlie and from Slack. When we send others via Slack, we have exposed the TCP port to access this service using ngrok, which is a network service that will allow you, well, basically to expose to the outside in a very quick and easy way a service. Obviously, there's a security kind of configuration behind this. Don't you just leave exposed services unsecure open into the internet, which we have done very clearly for the webinar. But just to build mock-up, this works. And then what n8n will do is respond and notify to Slack when something happens and execute actions over LimaCharlie leveraging the API. What LimaCharlie does is just communicate with the monitor network, all of the clients, all of the servers, all of the email systems that the client might have, or we might have, you might have, that can interact with LimaCharlie. And then when something gets done or we need to be notified about something, LimaCharlie will send notification back into n8n via ngrok. So, well, I've already gone through this. How LimaCharlie helps with this, again, is we leverage the detection and response rules that allows for the automatic response of certain events in the platform. Let me give you a very quick example that we'll be seeing shortly. Is when a new sensor gets enrolled into LimaCharlie, we want to know about that, particularly if that's, for instance, the first one that gets enrolled into the platform, because that way we know that something is being well done, right? So what that happens is that an event appears on the LimaCharlie platform on a certain stream of events, and we can configure an DNR rule that will match that event and immediately send a notification. How it sends this notification is via an output, which allows you to communicate with external systems. An output can be a webhook to n8n in this case. An output can be an SMTP kind of message. It can be a syslog message. LimaCharlie supports a lot of kind of outputs that you can leverage. I found the webhook the most easy and most usual one, because many external systems will allow you to use webhooks to receive notifications and to perform actions to those systems. You could even skip n8n for if you want to do really simple stuff, because you can just send directly the notification of a new sensor into Slack and post a message there. We just like to have an automation kind of central server to kind of change that message, give it some formats, maybe inform another third-party system, kind of do slightly more complex things. And then we will be leveraging the API, which allows external systems to communicate back into LimaCharlie. We'll be requesting a JWT token with an API key previously, and we'll be using that token to communicate back into the LimaCharlie cloud platform. What we can do is get a list of sensors, we can isolate sensors, we can de-isolate sensors, we can request a list of all of the sensors in there, and we can request, for instance, an action to be performed into a system or to interact with a LimaCharlie extension. In this case, we'll be using the Velociraptor extension to grab logs from a remote machine, and we will be storing those logs back into our internal system for analysis, because in incident response, what we usually want to do is always keep a local copy of that evidence in case we want to go back to that original zip with the files and make sure nothing has been altered, or prove that anybody else can come back to us the same conclusions as ourselves. So again, what will we do today in a demo shortly? We will be detecting when a new sensor gets installed into the platform. In this case, it's going to be a Windows sensor, and immediately we will be grabbing a log export of that Windows sensor event logs. That will be a full export of all of the logs in the machine, which is going to be quite short if it's a laptop. It's going to be probably a little bit longer if it's a domain controller. Potentially a lot more, a lot longer if it's a domain controller, right? But that can be just left running, and when you have it, you have it. We will also be obtaining a list of the currently installed sensors, obtaining information of specific sensors. Let's say I receive an alert, or I think certain host is suspicious. I want to get basic information about that, and only that specific sensor. We can do that. We will be performing very quick isolation of the isolation, which is simple enough to do via the web UI. But again, if we want to centralize everything and let also the other team members in a Slack channel, in this case, that we've done that. We can just automate that as well. And finally, we'll be acquiring those logs via the Velociraptor extension, which we will have done anyway automatically when it gets enrolled anyway. But if tomorrow we know that something else has happened there and we want to get a new copy of those logs, we can manually trigger that as well. And I'm not sure if I've said this, but we'll be doing at least the 4 last bullet points directly using Slack commands. Again, I will be explaining how to create a Slack bot and a Slack command because that's out of the scope of this webinar. But if you look for the Slack documentation, that's pretty straightforward. That's just creating a new application in your Slack environment and grabbing the API key or more likely token for the access to for that application or that bot.
That sounds super cool. So you're tasking the sensor from Slack.
Yes, basically.
Oh.
So we will be tasking jobs or tasks from Slack. The advantage of doing this is, first of all, you have a central way to doing everything, and that will save you time. If you receive a notification in the very Slack channel that says something suspicious has been happening on these endpoints, you can very quickly take the decision to grab a triage, grab some logs, grab some information, and very quickly trigger that action. And at the same time, inform the rest of the team members in the same Slack channel that has been done, and this has been the result. And that effectively is what saves you the most time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's get to action. Right, so we have the main sensor list for LimaCharlie. As you can see, it's pretty much empty except for the very basic extensions that you already have with the default kind of organization. The only thing we've added is the extension for Velociraptor. We won't be showing how to enable that because, again, that's a slightly off scope, but it's really straightforward, honestly. Just going to the catalog and installing that. We'll be using that to grab the logs later, but I'll come to that. So first of all, what we can do is get to our hosts. This is just a plain old Windows Server 2019 kind of machine. This is the installer for LimaCharlie, and it is pretty straightforward to install the sensor. Again, if you are in production environment, you can obviously either do it manually or just using whatever software distribution kind of packages that you're using, as Intune, anything really. There's an exe and there's also an MSI, which might be better for yourself, but I won't stop watching that. So as easy as that, using the installer and the key for the installation of the organization, we have a new agent that we can confirm going back into the platform that should be showing shortly. And we can see that we have received a new notification. So we have this Slack bot, which I've called the automaton because I wasn't feeling too in my initiative that day. And we see that we have received this notification, which is initial event pool for sensor, and this is the sensor ID issued. What has happened here is that we have received a new event in the platform that tells you basically there's been a new enrollment into the environment. How have we set that up? You can see also the sensor here. That is made via DNR rules. So we have created a DNR rule for notify enrollment. What this basically says, if we have an enrollment event, let me make that slightly bigger. If we have an enrollment event in the deployment stream of events within the platform, and there's been no error, that's pretty much what the rule says. It's pretty straightforward YAML file. Then take the response, which is send an output to the new enrollment notification output. Now, what is that output? If we go back and go to outputs, this is the one. And it's very straightforward. This has been configured as a tailored, streaming tailored output. via webhook. What that means is when a DNR rule sends something to this output, it will just send a webhook into this destination host, which is our nrock kind of endpoint, which represents how we access n8n from the outside. And obviously, you want to secure this because you don't want random people to be sending notifications into your Slack via n8n if they discover this. So you can sign this webhook with a secret key, and you can verify that secret key on the n8n side of things. Then what happens when n8n kind of gets that notification that the new sensor has been enrolled into the platform? So this is the main menu for n8n. You just directly go to enrollment notification. And this is pretty much how the flows kind of feel in n8n. I won't be stopping a lot of explaining how the flow kind of works. It's pretty straightforward if you want to try it, but it's, again, slightly off the scope here. But what this does is receive this webhook at the very beginning, verify the signature, very important because you only want to be processing signatures that you know are coming from Slack or coming from, in this case, LimaCharlie, and just discard any other. You will generate the JWT, which is the token you will be using to access the platform. You have to do this at least frequently. What we do is just generate a new one per task. And what we do is, encode and set an investigation ID. We'll be getting back to this later, and send an extension request into the platform. This is where we leverage the LimaCharlie API. So we basically send a post HTTP request into the extension request ext Velociraptor endpoint. The Velociraptor extension in LimaCharlie will be receiving this API call. We'll be specifying our organization ID so it knows where to perform an action, which is collect. And this is where we define what we'll be sending into the API, which is execute the Windows event logs EVTX kind of artifact on Velociraptor, which will get you all of the logs from the machine and get those back, basically. And then what it will do is format a response and post it back into Slack, which is this notification that we saw here. Because coming back to this, when a new enrollment is detected, it goes this way, request a new log pool to be performed on LimaCharlie via Velociraptor, and post it back into Slack. So we know something has actually happened automatically. And then what happens? We get another notification with a funny icon, because you have to keep it funny at the very least, which says event log pool for this sensor ID for completeness has finished, and the results are available at this local kind of path. That could be your file server, that could be, if you're feeling really brave, your SharePoint, or that could be an FTP server. N8n has the capability of saving files and a diverse kind of choice of locations. So what has happened here again is that this has gone through the DNR pool. When we receive in the platform, in the LimaCharlie main stream of events, that's why we don't specify in the stream here, a log get rep event kind of ID or event title, whatever you want to call it, and that matches the investigation ID with this random kind of string. It will perform an action. What is this kind of random string? This is what we set as an investigation ID. Okay? What this means is that we will only be notifying back into n8n those automatic actions that we actually triggered, or better said, we will only be notifying Slack, notifying N8N and then notifying Slack, if that makes sense, for those actions that were performed without automations. Because if you go into the platform and do the same thing, do a log pool, you probably don't want it to be notified the same way, because that kind of goes to the side. And also some events are shared about diverse types of different tasks, like precisely this kind of events. So you only want to get notified for the stuff you want. That's what we specify an investigation ID into every task, so we can identify the result of that task. If that matches, that effectively identifies something we want to be notified about. So that gets back to another output, which is very similar, just it will go to a different endpoint on any time, because that's a different thing we want to do to be doing effectively. So we can go to outputs, and this is the log pool notification. And effectively, this is exactly the same. You can reuse the same secret as we've done today. You shouldn't. Again, this is just a mock-up. And it's a different endpoint. So where that arrives is here into a different workflow, effectively. A different webhook. We still are verifying the signature to make sure this comes from LimaCharlie. We also generate a JWT in order to communicate with the LimaCharlie API. And basically, we will be creating a new folder now. In this case, this is a local machine, but it could be your file server or wherever you want to be storing the results. And well, in this case, if the results are very small, which is not usually the case, you will get the actual contents of that task back from LimaCharlie in base64 payload. If not, what you will get is a download URL that we can just access here. And then we will just write that file into the file server or wherever, format a response for Slack. That was pretty fast, but this is just JavaScript for formatting a message. I won't be getting that because it's JavaScript. So, and then we will be posting that back into Slack. And that is what we receive here. Where is this? So since I'm running N8N in a Docker, the actual path is slightly different depending on where you have mounted the volume for that container. But effectively, in my local Linux machine, which is where Docker is running, it has been mounted into here, N8N Docker local files. And then it's within the logs folder, because that's the only thing we're pulling in this demo. If we had triages, there might as well be triages or files, kind of different folders, so you have everything organized. And then you have this new folder that was created in that workflow where we were saving the results. And within that, we will have the copies for every log pool that we had done before. So hopefully that made sense. Just to go back to the general process, a new sensor gets enrolled into the LimaCharlie platform. That triggers an event in the platform, which gets sent to our central server for automations, which is N8N. And it will notify to Slack, telling us that there's been a new enrollment, and at the same time getting back to LimaCharlie and asking for a log pool to be performed, so we can immediately graph evidence from that new sensor being enrolled. Then, when that task has been finished, we also get LimaCharlie to generate an event, send it back to N8N, and N8N will just grab the result from that log pool and get it saved into our file server. We could add more actions in there, like we could hash that file, which is probably something we want to do if we want to be keeping the chain of custody. We could be decompressing these results and tucking them into Splunk, tucking them into Graylog, Elastic, anything that we want to be using for log analysis. This is actually something we do in a slightly more complex way. Every time we get a new sensor to be enrolled into the platform, that will effectively be sent to our log analysis server, basically. So if very moment, well, I'm not going to say the very moment, like, because if it's a DC, it's going to take a while to grab those logs. But as soon as possible, we will get the evidence processed and ready for analysis. All right, so what are other actions that we can perform into the, using the LimaCharlie platform, Slack, and all the infrastructure that we have been showing? So there's a lot of occasions where we want to grab the information and we want to grab it quite quickly, or we want the information to be gathered into the same place, which is where the shared kind of Slack channel system comes into place. Because if you share that very channel with the rest of the team members, you can be constantly exchanging information. You have to take care with the notifications, because that can get a little bit spammy sometimes, but generally it's a very good idea to share that, because everybody gets the same information at the same time. So if we wanted to get information for one specific server let's begin getting information for every server in there, which is, let's do /respond. And let's do list the sensors. All right, we get the confirmation that the command has been received by NA10. I'll be showing where this comes from soon. And we get a sensor listing. Something I really like from LimaCharlie is that it immediately gives you very interesting information when you get information about sensors. Among them is the kind of platform they're at and whether they are online or offline. But what we also do is get an export in CSV format that you can just drop into Slack with all of the available information for every single sensor in the environment. This obviously can get quite lengthy if there's hundreds or thousands of sensors in there, but you will just get a glimpse of it as a preview in Slack anyway. And if you want to download that, you can download that. And if you want to provide that to, a client for visibility of how many sensors you are currently monitoring, you can do that, or send that to the rest of the team members who should be in the Slack channel anyway, or just to keep track of how many sensors you have every day. Well, you have it. Immediately you can see that includes the sensors that represent an extension, but you can just filter that out if you want to. And we can see that we have the win-and random kind of string that Windows likes to put into host names, and which is the sensor we recently installed. What if we wanted specific information about this sensor? We could do /respond. Again, this / command, you can build it with Slack bot out of the scope of this, but you can just name it whatever or use the same bot with several commands. That's up to you. Let's do sensor underscore useful and this specific one. There you go. So we pretty much immediately get the response from this, and we get a summary of the status of that sensor, which is the sensor ID, whether it's isolated or not, whether it's online or not, the kind of platform it is. You could translate that into an actual string, which I forgot to do for this demo. But you can see whether it's, how long has it been alive, or from which date it has been alive in the platform, when it was first enrolled, what's the internal IP, and, you can extract any information that you can see here. The external IP, you can get if kernel is available, the organization ID, which should be the same one for all of the organization, the sensor version, which is something you want to keep in mind because that should be probably a specific one. You want everything to be supported up to the latest. What is happening here for the two commands is that in our Slack bot, we have configured, again, slightly out of scope, but just go through it. What this command does is just take this message that we have sent via Slack, that command, that /response sensor info and that hostname, back into NA10 via webhook, exactly like LimaCharlie did with the output, just a different system. Where that arrives is here. I called this Webflow receiver because I wasn't feeling in my native that day either. We can also verify the signature from that Slack message, so we know that this message comes via Slack. You could be filtering by IP address, etc. to see if you want to be more secure. Again, this is a mockup. And you immediately reply to that webhook saying, okay, I have received this command and I gotta do stuff with it, which is what we receive here and here. And then I have just a switch statement, which is depending on what kind of command we have. It's sensors, sensor info, grab logs with and isolate, which I'll be showing shortly. It will execute different sub workflows, let's call it. So for the list sensors, again, the same thing. We grab the JWT to access the API. We leverage that API to grab that sensor list. It's as easy as using the sensors and then the organization ID as an endpoint, as a get method, including that JWT to be authorized. Get that back. If there was no sensors found, which wasn't this case, it would just return an error. Those sensors were found. But in this case, well, pretty much what this does from here to here is just create that CSV file and then upload that into Slack. Then we generate that count for every platform, which is that. So this is what we generate, a count of online sensors and each platform. And we send that back. So we format that and that will arrive back here and will be used to reply back to the Slack channel again, which is where we get the sensor listings, see their kind of message when we get the sensor info. Or in case of the sensor listing, we get both this message and we also get the CSV being dumped there, which we can again download, share, whatever. Just go very fast about actual actions that we can trigger on the endpoints that we are monitoring from the Slack channel as well. We can do /respond, isolate, and the same hostname here. There you go. Isolation issued. It says one census because we can potentially put a lot of host names here as a list. But if you go back to the LimaCharlie platform, yeah, right now it's attempting to isolate, but that should be pretty much immediate. And if you go to the actual into the actual endpoint and you do ping google.com, you are already getting general failures, which means it's out of network. This being something more fancy that is constantly being followed and doing the same thing, which is sending an order, but instead of isolate, we will de-isolate that. We also get confirmation that the de-isolation task has been issued. And yep, immediately we can see the network coming back into the machine, and we can verify that as well on the web UI if we wanted to triple check that network access allowed now. In the background, I won't stop very much because it's exactly the same thing. So, well, this is slightly fancier because for both isolate and de-isolate, I do the same thing, just depending on whether. Again, I'm sorry, this is JavaScript, but depending on whether I've sent isolate or another thing, which will only be the isolate, here I will either post or delete, because that's another fancy thing from the LimaCharlie API. Many things that you can do is the same endpoints, but the method, the HTTP method varies, and it makes perfect sense because you send sorry, we send an order to the isolation kind of endpoint. Well, actually, is the SID from the sensor and then isolation. So if you post into this method, it will get isolated. If you send a delete to this method, it gets the isolation removed. So that makes sense. And it's pretty much the same thing. We format the output, which is this, well, no mobile phones kind of icon, which is here, and then the message back. And then what if we wanted to grab another kind of log package from that sensor? Because, well, we got the log from yesterday, but something happens today. So we want to do it again. What we can do is just do respond, grab underscore logs, and then the same endpoints. We should get confirmation shortly. There you go. You get receive command and velociraptor log fetch for sensor, blah, 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 issues. Again, what happens? It arrives into the receiver. It detects that the command has been grab logs, so it gets this way to the grab battle logs workflow, which is very slightly more complex, but that's just because we want to be specifying that investigation ID that we talked about before to make sure that the event that we are recovering from the platform is actually the one we want, the one generated by our automations, and hence the one we want to get back. And yep, it sends the extension request. You can do this with the velociraptor extension, but there's many extensions on LimaCharlie that you can leverage to do very different actions and interact with very different systems. So, and the structure is the same. You just specify the organization ID you want to be taking action on, and then just a bunch of information like the invitation ID, the investigation ID we were speaking about, and the data you want to be sending, which is, again, the same thing. We want to be grabbing Windows event logs EVTX. We want it to time out at a lot of time from now. And we want to be doing in a specific sensor ID. And then, when that finishes, we get back the notification, which in this case is going to take slightly longer if it's a complex system, like, again, a DC. So here's the difference. When we listed sensors, since the platform will give us an answer pretty much immediately, the same workflow will reply back into Slack and give the message back to you. But in this case, since it has to get scheduled as a task in the velociraptor extension, we don't want to be actively waiting, because effectively that overloads the automation system, having something check every minute or just waiting forever. And this is something very cool about the LimaCharlie platform, the way that you can get notifications back from that event stream, so you don't have to actually be actively waiting, which actually happens in other different platforms. So we effectively free processing threads, we save processing power, and that effectively also means that we are spending less energy and making everything slightly cheaper, right? And then when that log task, the log grabbing task finishes on the platform, you get that very same DNR rule triggered, which is the notify log pull, because we get this this event with this investigation ID. We get notified back into the same log pull notification endpoint on NA10 that we had before, and it does the exact same thing that it did when a new sensor came into the platform, and the same thing was triggered, which is a pull of those Windows logs. Exactly the same. And if we go back into Slack, we get this notification again because we have a new event log pull from sensor finished, and results are available again. It starts with 1D77. We go back into our machine and we want to check about those logs being dropped here. Again, it was this hostname A7 something, and the package starts with 1D77. There it is. So if we wanted to check this, well, this is a pretty standard kind of result structure for Velociraptor, and you get the results, and you get a JSON file with all of the events from that system, which is a fairly new one, so it's quite small. That's also why it took so little time to do the log pull. But obviously, if this was again a DC, this might take at least a lot of minutes, and might be taking a lot of time because it also depends on the network on the other end. So, and yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you guys. On the demo, we have leveraged the DNR pools, the output, and the API for LimaCharlie, and I've shown you how to streamline kind of a process, which is getting notification when something happens in the platform, which is when a new sensor gets enrolled and when a new pool of logs via Velociraptor has finished. So you automatically get your results either on Slack. Well, you always get notified with Slack on our cases, and then you automatically get the results into your file server or perform any action with them. And we've also seen how to leverage that API to actually perform actions over the endpoints, which is the isolation or de-isolation, and then grab information back actively from the LimaCharlie cloud platform about sensors, sensor information, and sensor lists. I think that's about it, Christopher. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Thank you so much for taking us through that. One thing I'm curious about, which I've heard from our users, you're using Velociraptor to pull back the logs, and you're deploying that down onto the endpoint through the EDR agent. How does that workflow compare to working with Velociraptor, how you might have before you use LimaCharlie?
So, Velociraptor is just a way, in our case, to grab everything from the machine. So if you didn't use Velociraptor, you could be using anything else. I've used in the past Siler, for instance. I've also used, other tools I've used just PowerShell scripts that you can very easily find that will grab forensic evidence from the machines for you. But the way we use the Velociraptor extension means that we can just do that in a single API call. Otherwise, we would be able to do the same thing using an executable or a third-party package. We would just have to use one API call to upload that into the endpoint, another API call to execute that, and another API call to grab the results back. Well, actually, we would have to actively query for when that has actually finished, or just build a whole backend notification system from the endpoint back to us. We save up all of that with the Velociraptor request in LimaCharlie. So that eases things a lot.
Awesome. Okay. I know we're going a little long on time here, so I'm just going to wrap things up. For those watching, if you take away just 3 things from today's session, let them be these. First, the flexibility to customize your deeper operations for different client needs isn't just nice to have, it's essential for scaling any security practice. Second, the dramatic time savings isn't just about efficiency, it's about being able to deliver higher value services to more clients without burning out your team. And last, choosing an infrastructure-first platform like LimaCharlie SecOps Cloud Platform isn't just a technology decision, it's a business strategy that can fundamentally change what's possible for your organization. Guillermo, I want to thank you so much for being generous with your time and insights today. The transparency you've shown about both the challenges and solutions is exactly what makes these sessions valuable for our community. And for everyone who joined us today, here's how you can take the next step. If you want to see how the SecOps Cloud Platform could work for your specific use case, you can try it for free at limacharlie.io. No sales calls are required. You can just sign up and start exploring. But if you'd prefer to talk through your specific requirements with someone from our team, you can book a demo with the same URL. And if you found today's content valuable, we'll be doing more webinars in the coming months. Keep an eye on your inbox for the invitations. And finally, thank you to everybody again who joined us today. We know your time's valuable, and the fact that you spent an hour with us learning about DFIR at scale means a lot. So until next time, stay secure out there and happy hunting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Guillermo.
Thank you all.